Hello, my name is Roy Poyan, and I'm the Director of Families Impacted by Opioids. I want to thank you for joining us for this next episode of Fentanyl and Families in Harm's Way. In today's session, we're going to take a look at the addiction behavior. We're going to take a look at it from the perspective of the family member, not the person who's misusing substances. It is a matter of value for you to build a strong practice of boundary setting. And you can say, no, Roy, I thought this was about behavior. We're going to talk about their behavior, family behavior. No, when you're talking about their behavior and you're talking about a family member, you should be speaking about boundary setting. That's the behavior in relation to addiction that we want to address. Remember, all these seminars are about the family member, not so much them, but how the family member responds and creates an environment for successful lifelong recovery. So with this in mind, your ability to set clear, reasonable boundaries is very important to you. And you might say, no, it's important to them. Remember, we're saying the boundaries around them. No, we're not doing that. We're saying the boundaries around the family members, okay, each individually, because that's where the boundaries mean the most. In other words, you cannot control them. They basically have a hard time controlling themselves. You can really only control yourself. And in that understanding, we want to make sure that you have the skill set to understand, how do I set up boundaries? What boundaries are most important to me as a family member? And what should I expect when the boundaries are violated or not adhered to? How do I respond? And how do we get back on track in reestablishing good, valuable boundaries? Well, that's going to be an art, and you're going to get better at it and better at it, but you're only going to get better at it if you pay attention to it. You're not going to accidentally get to be a really good person in setting boundaries by accident. But you will get there by paying close attention to what some of the social scientists have identified, and then take that learning and make it yours. So it will be yours. It will be your design of boundaries. It'll start as possibly an article, a YouTube video, where you receive some ideas that you can then nurture and develop. That's what we're trying to do here. There is no hardened way to sit there and say to the mother, Donna or Allison, if you do this, you will be setting up boundaries appropriately. It's going to be your design. And that's what we're going to learn today. So let's take a closer look at this. Come on over to the family table. Let's sit down with you and your family, and let's decide what you can do for the benefit of you in setting up your boundaries, because this is all about you surviving this journey. If you don't survive this journey well, we can assure you they certainly won't. So our focus is on the family members and boundary setting each individually. The parents can't set up one boundary and his siblings set up a different one, and they conflict. It's better if everybody understands the same boundary, and that way when he hits the boundary or she hits the boundary and goes around to another sibling or somebody else, like an aunt, and says, well, I don't like the fact that they're doing this, how do you feel about it? And they come off with a completely different set of boundaries or understandings that compromises yours. That's really troubling for them, it's troubling for you. So you kind of see now, wow, it's really important as a family that we all collaborate. It is, especially when it comes to boundary setting. Come and join us at the family table. Let's get to work.
Hello, welcome back to our family table. And we're going to talk today about the topic of boundaries. Okay, let me redo this. Hello. Thanks for joining me at the family table. What we're going to talk today about in a more detailed way is the topic of setting boundaries. And then we titled it Addiction Behavior. Oh, goodness. Okay, I'll get through this. Me. Hello, thanks for joining us at the family table. We want to take a closer look now at some of the different parts of addiction behavior. You know, when we start to look at addiction behavior, we ask ourselves, so it's their behavior, what can we do about it? Well, there are things that we can do about it because in many cases their behavior is in response to our behavior. They're also behaving in such a way to kind of test the limits of boundaries to see kind of like what they can get away with in order that they can gain more access to the drug, which is their overall objective. So let's take a look at the study guide, which will help us to identify some of these characteristics. And in doing so, we're going to see that the behavior falls into certain types of, what we might call knowns. And what we're doing is we're actually saying, all right, we pretty much know that in the behavior that we're observing, this person is going to exhibit things like aggressive behavior, manipulation. They're going to lie and cheat and steal. And you might think that's so uncharacteristic of my son, daughter, aunt, uncle, husband, wife. I don't think that that's really who they are. That doesn't matter, who they were. We have to take the behavior of what they present as they're presenting it. And just know that this is coming from a mind that we've already discussed, the changes in the neuronal firing, where the mind is kind of overriding even their personality. So what you're seeing doesn't make sense is true, but what you're seeing makes perfect sense to what the brain just commanded it to do. It did what it said it would do. The problem is what it is doing is coming from a source that is driven by the desire for more of the drug. And for that reason, all of the different decisions that are being made are driven from that desire. So when we sit and we take a look at, all right, well, so what ends up happening with our loved one in terms of the behavior? Well, that would depend on what stage of the process we're in terms of their using, how close are they, and then when they detox and they get into an IOP or residential or partial hospital program, and for several weeks or several months, they're kind of encapsulated in receiving cognitive behavioral therapy, dialectic family therapy. These are all treatments and therapy and discussions that help to moderate their behavior by helping them to understand how to change their thought patterns and see things for what they really are, or to avoid certain types of triggers so they're not exposed to that kind of a stimulus. Now, that's them controlling their behavior. How do you control their behavior? It's simple, you don't. You won't, and you shouldn't even try to control their behavior. You can control your behavior. You can set up your behavior so it's an example that they could follow and work within with their behavior, but you cannot make them be a certain thing in order for you to feel comfortable. So let's not just talk singularly about behavior, but let's also incorporate boundaries, which are a way that we can set up our behavior so we know the boundary. And you sit there and you think, no, the boundary goes around them. And it's like, no, it doesn't. It goes around you. And it's not the outside of the fence, it's the inside of the fence. The boundary is yours. You press up against the boundary, and they will be pressing up against the outside of the fence of the boundary, okay? And they're always probing your boundaries to see where there's a weakness, and they can divide. Another really common aspect is in the family system as a dynamic. It may be that the sister's doing a great job, but his brother is a little bit weak in keeping his boundaries, and the next thing you know, he's enabled, and this person's found an ally, and the next thing you know, we'll get into it later, a triangulation is formed, and kind of a unification of, well, help me convince mom that, she should let me stay at the house, even though mom says I can't as long as I'm using, because I need a place to stay. I don't want to pay the consequences of using my drugs, so I want to manipulate my brother by penetrating his boundary and having him think he should enable me. Now, they don't go through all those thoughts, but because we're studying it, we do. And that's how we're getting in front of this. That way, when we're responding to a certain way that they are behaving, we could do so with confidence, knowing I'm conducting myself exactly the way I was taught. And by working with my counselor, we've set up, some roles that I will play for myself in order to firm up and maintain and be consistent with that boundary setting. So you can kind of see that not only is it important that we increase our awareness of boundaries, but that we incorporate a professional to help us to practice and really solidify them. But there are things that in boundary setting you'll want to have as kind of a common rule. The first step is acknowledging and recognizing that a boundary has been broken. So that means something didn't go the way we thought it should go, and therefore it needs to be addressed. You back away from that, even in a little way, and that's the beginning of the crack in the dam. And they will take full advantage of it, and don't think for a second that they missed it, and they probably strategically were the ones that created the crack. So they're delighted that it got cracked. So what you need to do is, in the workbook, you could say, I believe our agreed boundary regarding so-and-so has been broken. Repeat after me. I believe our agreed boundary regarding whatever it is has been broken. You should be able to repeat that with true strength, okay? Because they're going to read your tone, your body language, to see, do you really mean what you're saying, or are you just saying it because you think it's the right thing to say at the time? Then you could say, I feel blank about this, and then we need to discuss this, meaning I'm holding you and me accountable for the fact that this was broken. Even though it wasn't broken by me, it was broken by you. We're holding both of us accountable. I'm being held accountable by not letting it pass. You're being accountable for doing it. And then you make in the initial statement, so what behavior is unreasonable? What is it that you're trying to focus on, and not the person? So what did I just say? Well, you're not trying to control the behavior of the person. You're not trying to control the person. You're trying to control their behavior. So when you go out and say to them, you have broken this rule that we had, it's different from saying, your behavior has created this problem. See how there's a difference? I didn't say you. I said your behavior, as though the two are separate from each other. You want to separate them from their behavior. That cognitively helps them to do the same. We want them to hold themselves accountable for their behavior as though it's a second person in their life. And by you doing it that way with the boundaries, you're helping them to see that more universally as being the way that maybe they should be looking at this. And then what you're feeling is about the behavior. So you're not gonna sit there and say, you make me feel this way. You would say, that behavior makes me feel uncomfortable and I don't like it. See, there's a big difference between you are making me feel, well, you just told them that they have full control over you and go for it. Instead, you're saying, your behavior is making me feel. So these are kind of the styles that a good counselor will sit down and review with you. and you'll set up a whole game plan, and then it'll get destroyed. And then it'll get challenged, and then it'll get broken, and then it'll be repaired, and then it'll get fixed. And you sit there and you think, well, Roy, why bother doing all of this? Well, primarily because you're never going to stay the same. This is a constant evolving. If you're looking for a plateau, there'll be few times in this journey that you have a plateau where nothing changes, and for weeks and weeks, it was all the same, and isn't this Camelot? It could happen, but maybe it'll happen in minor ways. But there's always moving parts when it comes to life, and those parts are almost over dramatized when it comes to life, where it involves substance use disorders. So say what you want now and restate the boundaries. So you've basically said your behavior is unreasonable, and how will you do this in the future? And then you're going to say what you're feeling about that behavior. And you're going to say it very clearly. You're going to describe it to them. Describe what you're feeling. And then say what you want to do now in terms of restating the boundaries. What boundaries need to be restated, okay? And you're not going to let them off the hook as you move forward. I notice that every time these are just, standard phrases. Yes, I hear what you are saying about why this happened, but I still need you to keep the agreed boundaries. These are all in the book, by the way. I'm not creating them right now as we're talking. You're neither all-powerful nor powerless. You do have influence, and you do have bargaining power. So when you start to think that you're powerless or you don't have bargaining power, they're going to roll all over you. And it's not true. The fact is, you do have those things. You just maybe need a little help in identifying how it is that you're going to exercise them. So how are we going to do that? Well, it gets back to the 3D coping skills. So what we want to do is we want to determine a solution, develop a decision, and then design a plan of action for this specific type of issue. It may be that the whole boundary doesn't need to change in how you're doing it, but maybe an aspect of it. And that's what you're determining the solution around and making a decision on what it is that you're going to change. And really, when you start to look at, so who's out there to help me? Well, when it comes to boundary setting, it doesn't have to be somebody that's specific to addiction therapies for family members. It could be just a counselor or somebody that has experience in other types of family therapies that understands the roles that are played when boundaries are being set and kept. I want to thank you for taking the time to review this. Boundary setting, along with enabling, are the two core competencies that you're going to need a professional to help you with. But once you've done it, it's almost generational, because they'll remember how you did it with them, and they will then do it with your children. So you're taking what is a bad situation and you're turning it into a very generational, kind and loving way that in the future your family will be more functional because you did this. You see, when you get right down to it, by you taking the time to look at these episodes, by you going further than what these episodes offer and continuing to educate yourself on these specific categories as needed, you're creating a new kind of like nomenclature, an inventory of how does our family respond to trauma, to strife, to issues. Well, up to now, you're probably, we wing it. We sit down, we argue it out, and we don't have any models or anything. I don't need any stinking models. Well, the fact is, when you have a model, a template, it's a place to start from. It in and of itself is not you. But when you use it, you can make parts of it those things that become generational strengths. And isn't that the kind of like, isn't that what we want on our epitaph, on our gravestone? That, they came, they loved, they shared, they helped us to grow, and they prepared us for life. And we're grateful for all that they did for us. Yeah, but you did it in the middle of addiction and everything that was happening that was going wrong. That's right. That's what life is about. The challenges that are provided to us, the way that we respond to them, and the way that that is then carried forth for these people to then use as their repertoire when they deal with it later in their lives. It's a beautiful thing. It's a continuous. I want to thank you for your time, and I hope you found this information to be helpful. Don't stop here. There's a lot to learn when it comes to boundaries. And go out and get a professional and start to look at some YouTubes. They'll make perfect sense to you. Hello. I want to thank you for continuing to view our episode. And we're now going to work into the area of the 3Ds. This is an important characteristic for the family to develop skills in. And we'll start by taking the time to look at an issue and then determine the issues based on the area of determining a solution, developing a decision, and designing a plan of action. By using your Module 3 workbook and going to a specific issue, you'll be able to find that the first step in that 3D skill set is the FTR, the Family Transformational Model. And the Family Transformational Model is a set-up way, each time the same way, that we will take 5 categories to look at in determining a solution. And each category is going to have 3 questions. So let's get started. The first is to define the issue. Naturally, we'll want to know what the issue is. The word issue is really problem, but we're saying the word issue is, the reason we're saying the word issue is it's just a little bit easier to digest, because it's not always a problem. Sometimes it's just something that's happening, and we need to determine a solution to it. The next question is, how does the issue impact the family? We need to know that. We need to know, we have an issue, that's fine. The issues can exist, but if it's impacting the family, in what way is it impacting the family? And then what steps can the family take to prepare and then respond to the issue? That's very important for us to know. The fact is that this issue exists and it's impacting the family. We tend to believe maybe there was something we could have done to kind of get ready for it. And if there was, then we would want to have taken those steps, which is what all these episodes are about. And then who can help assist us and the family in our response? So we want to start to ask ourselves, we know that there's an issue, we know that it's impacting the family, and there are things that we could do to prepare for this, but we're probably going to need a resource, information, another person outside of our family, or maybe one of our family members specifically can use their functionality and contribute. So we want to identify that. And then what should the family expect as their outcome? And kind of a start with the end in mind thought, where we're saying, if we're going to do something, it's going to result in something. So is that result desirable? Is that really what we want? Because if we're going to create a solution, then we want the solution's outcome to be what we expect it would be. So in each of these categories that I just described, 1 through 5, there are 3 questions, and we're going to ask ourselves each of these. Let's go back into the first category, define the issue. Clearly state what happened or what will happen. We want to know very clearly what happened or what's likely to happen. And then write that down. Identify who's involved or who should be involved, and then what would you like to have happen or like to see happen. The third question in every category is going to be used. You'll see how in just a minute. But just remember, the third question in every category, so this question right here, the way you answer it, will be reused. Now the next question is, how is the issue impacting the family? Who in the family exactly is impacted? In what way are they impacted? And then the third question is, what is needed to move forward? And then the third category is, what steps can the family take to prepare and then respond to the issue? The 3 questions again. What needs to be done? And then prioritize that list. Who needs to be involved? And then what will it look like, the third question, what will it look like when completed? Then the fourth category is, who can help and assist the family in their response? The 3 questions are, how to search and organize this organization to help you. In other words, it's not enough that you know you're going to go and introduce yourselves to a treatment center in your community. You want to start to determine, how do I look for them and organize my way of seeking help, because it might not just be that group alone. You may also need other services to kind of start to create a who can assist us. And it may be many different types of people. What to ask from them, and then what to expect. Remember the third question, what to expect. And then the 5th category is, what should the family expect as their outcome? Well, that has to do a lot with timing. And if it takes a certain amount of time, let's be realistic of what that is. That has something to do with the expense of the involvement, of getting involved in this issue. And then the third question being, required changes, our changes as family members, for this response to successfully take place. Now, let's state what our solution is. Hey, this is the great news. You've already developed your solution. By answering each of these 3 questions, the third question in every category, you'll pull forward now into your statement. So your first sentence of your statement is the third answer in the first category. What would you like to have happen or like to see happen? Well, that becomes your first sentence. So what your first sentence for your solution statement is, what we would like to see happen is, and you just pull your answer from there to here. Do the same thing with the second category. How does the issue impact the family? Using the third question's answer, what is needed for the family to move forward? So now your second sentence is, what's needed to move forward is. And now you're accumulating these answers from these categories, the third question, and it's actually becoming your first sentence, your second sentence, your third sentence, your fourth sentence, and your 5th sentence in your solution statement. So your solution statement is going to sound something like, what we would like to see happen is, and what's needed to move forward will be, and then the third question from the third category, what it will look like when completed will be, and then what we expect will be, and then what's required for us to have a successful response is. Now those are your 5 sentences. You've just constructed your solution. And this is how you go about using a model for creating a solution. For any issue in life you have to face, you can use this as a way of approaching it. Now let's go to the other area, which is the second coping skill, making a decision. Let's make a value-based decision. Let's make a decision each time that kind of balances with what we value most. So first we want to determine, what are our values? Well, the best way to do that is to write down on a piece of paper, what types of things do you as an individual value most? And each member of your family can do this in a kind of a group exercise. And then once you've done that, I value love, I value honesty, I value relationships and sharing. These could all be an individual's 1, 2, 3. Then prioritize them. Which of the 1, 2, 3 is most important? Then have each member of the family do the same thing. And then you can sit there and say to the family, what was your number 1? What was your number 2? What was your number 1? What was your number 1? What was your number 1? And then what was your 2? What was your 2? What was your 3? What was your 3? And where you start to see many people in the family say, well, my number 1 is relationships, my number 2 was trust, and my number 3 was love. Well, then you talk to another person, they say, well, my number 1 was love, my number 2 was personal expression or confidentiality, or so they mentioned something different, but they did mention love. And then the third member of the family happens to mention love also. You know now that love is a value of the family. So whatever decisions you make, you want to balance it on the fact of, does this disrupt our values? If it does, at least you know that it does, and to what degree. You're calculating that. But at least also you're including, what do we value most? Let's make sure our decisions don't counter that. And now, in the first step, we're going to identify exactly what's happened. And this is, by the way, in your book, okay? And it is for each of the episodes. Now, identify exactly what's happened, what happened, how did it happen, who did it happen to. Then the second step is analyze the situation, assess the problem, identify the problem, and in what areas did the problem create an impact. You're writing all of these down. The third step of that the third step in the decision-making model is, what is the number of one contributing factor? What is causing this issue to take place? You need to know that before you make a decision. The fourth step is, now that you know the number one factor, you need to go out and find out what information there is about this. Your primary source, you're going to go to the actual person or organization that's involved with this and ask them, what is this issue, and help us to understand it better. The secondary source would be, somebody's telling you this happened, or somebody suggests that you should do something a certain way, and it's coming from somebody else other than the primary source. It could be an article, a clinical paper. These are all secondary sources, and you gather them and you make them part of your primary, secondary information gathering. The third area that you look at is your gut. What does your gut, because that's often where our faith comes in, and other things that are very important when making decisions get included. So trust your gut is what we're saying in the decision-making process. The fifth step in making a good quality decision is where you're taking a criteria and saying, let's take what we're going to make a decision about and let's balance it on the criteria to make sure that we're covering all of our bases. And this will ensure safety of your loved one. Is safety a part of what's being considered? And do we have the resources that are needed to do the decision we're looking at? And then, do we understand the timetable? Is it realistic? And do we understand the negative impacts? Because every decision has a positive and negative. Well, identify what the negative outcomes might be so that you can weight the factor of, is this a good decision? And then, would you do this would you ask others to do this if they were doing it for you? Meaning it was done for you or to you. Is this still a good decision? These are all areas that you want to take a look at. The third coping skill is in the area of the family plan of action. And everybody could say, well, Roy, listen, we're just going to go out and do it. Well, it's going to get done a lot more effectively. I want to warn you that the addiction industry is not organized. And then again, either is the family. So you're taking two disorganized organizations and you're putting them together. So a plan is a very good idea. The other factor is, you're going to more than likely require the assistance of a lot of different groups. And as time goes by, those groups are going to change. And now it's a whole new set of groups that you're dealing with. When you're at the hospital, the ER, that's what that is. Then you move over to detox, that's what that is. Then you move over to therapy and treatment, and that lasts for 16 weeks. That's what that is. Then you're looking at sober living, recovery, maybe incarceration, and then reentry, on all that's involved in that. So there's all sorts of reasons why a plan put on paper based on the decision and the information gathering that you've made, based on the solution that you know you want to use, are very good ideas. It all comes together with the plan of action. Then you take the plan of action and you go find a professional to help you. Everything that we've done up to now is to position you to a place where you can be properly assisted and directed and supported. This is what's often missing in the families. This is what exhausts the families. This is where the families get into fights internally on. So, for that reason, we're going to apply the 3D coping skills. Determine a solution. We're going to develop a decision, and we're going to design a plan of action. And we're going to do it each time. I hope this is helpful for you. I'm confident it will be.